Hey, everybody, welcome in. It is Wednesday, July 17th. We are 2 weeks until the bar exam. How you doing, Tracey?
I'm doing fine.
Yeah, we hope so. This has been a good week so far in my calls with students. I feel like people are doing great things and really getting a lot of improvement and coming along, which is exciting. Yeah, it's been a week where people have made a lot of progress, and that's always exciting to see as a coach, right? They move from competence to not competent. Hey there, we got Amanda with us. How are you?
Hi, I'm doing well. How's everybody here doing?
We were just talking about how this is the week when we see a lot of improvement from students. They go from that point of, I'm not sure if I'm doing right, to I got it, I feel pretty confident. It's a great feeling as a coach, isn't it, to see that happening?
Yeah, and actually the one-on-one sessions that I've had in the last 2 weeks, that's something we're focusing on, exactly how much progress can be made in these next couple of weeks. And then during my coaching call on Monday, that was also something like the validation of now I know I'm doing all the right things because I'm seeing the
Mm,
results and
yeah.
just continuing to remember that if you've been following all along, you're doing the right things.
I think if you've been working steadily and you've been following all along, this is the time when it starts to come together, and you should feel good about it. Now, on the other side, if you haven't felt it coming together yet, there is still time to do all of that. There's no question about that. A lot of people now are starting to get into that flow that we want. But I've seen a lot of people go from not great to passing in this last 2 weeks. I think we all have, right? And so this is not the time to panic, and it's not the time to give up. We've got a lot of study questions this week, a lot of people talking about what should I be doing? How should I be working at this point? So we'll get to all those and try and answer them. Let me start by just reminding everyone that my preview videos are now posted in all of your courses. They are now
But
in lesson
everyone's
one.
always asking for them.
We
Everyone's always
are.
asking for them.
Yeah, I'm a victim of my own success. If 2024 Jackson could go back and talk to 1992 or 93 Jackson, he'd say, don't do those videos. But there we are. Anyway, they're in lesson 1.5 for every exam. And if you haven't watched them, they're about a half hour in length. I go through the previous exam, which would have been the February test, and talk about what was tested and how it was tested and just some general feedback. And then I look at the topics within each subject that seem to get tested frequently. And then I make the dreaded prediction or preview of where I think the exam is going using a 1 to 5 scale of likelihood, and then just wrap up. The one thing I do want to say to everybody, though I do think you should watch the video because I think they are valuable, but you should not rely on them exclusively. That is, if you haven't studied a subject yet, and I don't say that it's going to this doesn't have a high likelihood of being on the exam, it doesn't mean that you get a free pass to not study it. You still got to study it. The only real value, I think, is if you've got a couple of subjects, let's say, and you're just not sure which one to give more emphasis to, maybe you want to listen to what I've said there and take more time with it. But certainly there's no one that I know of that's infallible with these, and it can be very different than what we think it's going to be. I will say that I feel pretty confident about UBE in Florida. I feel less confident sometimes about California, and Georgia is a total crapshoot. I just never know what they're going to do in Georgia. Sorry for those of you in Georgia, but that's just the reality. 19 subjects.
It's a rainy day in Georgia.
It is a rainy day in Georgia. Those questions they're killers. Speaking of the Georgia questions, we did put into your Georgia books the February 2024 essay questions and our model answers to them. Now, I have to tell you, I think the Georgia essay questions are by far the most difficult right now. They're very lengthy questions, aren't they, Amanda? They just go on and on. And it's a 45-minute essay, and they're longer questions, longer
Yeah,
fact patterns than we see in Florida or California. So I did the
absolutely.
drafting this time. I think I felt guilty about the preview video in Georgia. So I drafted answers to the 4 essay questions in Georgia, and it was a nightmare. It was a brutal nightmare. But I wrote relatively short answers. I didn't try to do 1,500, 2,000 words because I don't think most people can write that much. I tried to stay about 850 to 1,000 words. And those are in the FLA structure, very severely FLA. So if you're a Georgia student and you're looking for how do I write FLA, go and check out those books. That's in lesson 1.2 in your Georgia course. It's the Georgia essay book. I think we also have the essay questions from February 2024 for UB, Florida, and California in your book, so you can check those out as well. So just something to be aware of. In any event, when we talk about the preview videos, you may have very different ideas as an applicant of what's going to be on the exam, and that's fine. Follow your own intuition. I think that would be my thought about that. So we'll see. It's always interesting to see how they come out, isn't it?
You are uncannily accurate, though.
I am, but it scares me. And here's the other thing about these previews. I want to talk for just a second about constitutional law, criminal law. The decisions and things that have happened in the last few weeks are so dramatic and so big. And we talked about this last week. They're not going to be tested, we don't think. Certainly not on the UBE. I don't think they'll be tested in California. But Florida and Georgia have a tendency to want to track the political winds and go some of these directions, and I would say more conservative directions. So you need to be aware of these decisions. If you're not familiar with what's happened in the last couple of weeks, because you've been studying, then you should definitely check the constitutional law module in your course. There is an update in which I talk about the Supreme Court decisions and my sense of how they might be tested or not be tested. I think we're just, as I'm reading social media and other things, I'm discovering the Chevron and its progeny, that whole line of decisions is now under attack because of the recent decision. That's going to have huge implications down the road. Obviously, we have the Trump immunity decision, but then this week we also had the dismissal of a special prosecutor, and that's a massive change in the powers of the executive. Now, there's no way, I don't think anyone saw that one coming. I don't even think in Florida and Georgia they saw that one coming. So I don't expect anything about that. But it's possible that one jurisdiction or more has written a question talking about executive powers, and you might find yourself thinking one of the executive powers, which was to appoint a special prosecutor, it's no longer there, apparently, or at least at this moment, according to the judge in Florida. So it's a fast-changing landscape. Is that fair to say? Feels that way. So that's the world we're living in right now. Just be aware of it. I think the other thing, and both Amanda and Tracey probably can comment on this, there's so much happening in the political world right now that it's easy to be distracted by that because it's really important stuff, regardless of your politics. It's just important, but it's not your job for the next 2 weeks, right? Your job is to get ready for the bar exam, which means you've got to keep your head down and just stay out of all of the rest of that. Amanda, what's your thought about that?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think that a lot of time we can get spent like Googling on things, and I'll get these weird questions right now, especially around con law, politics, laws that might be passed, and all that's super interesting, but you can catch up on that later. It has nothing to do with the world of the bar exam, really.
Yeah, it really isn't. Tracey, you agree? Keep your head down, keep
Oh,
working.
you absolutely have to cocoon yourself now. And there's a couple of different reasons. One is you can get confused and think that you have to add to your mind maps because of something that you saw on the news today, and that would be a mistake. The second reason is it just depletes you. It depletes your energy, especially right now. It's so emotionally charged everywhere. You really have to protect yourself and protect your energy right now. Just turning off the news, not looking at it on your phone, not trying to overanalyze it or figure it out. All these problems and all these dramas are still going to be here 2 weeks from now. So there's plenty of time to get back involved and get anxious and nervous and whatever it does to you.
I think that's such a good way to put it. And I also want to acknowledge that for some people, that statement of ignore it and put your head down can feel like a very privileged statement to be able to make, right? Jackson's life as a cisgender white male, no matter who's elected, that's a reality, right? For all of you, that is not a reality, but the bar and this situation, or whatever side of the aisle you are on, doesn't matter. Your side will be better with you as a bar attorney. So that's just the facts, whatever you're fighting for. So don't take it as we don't care or anything like that. Of course, people care, but CBR, as far as I know, doesn't take any political side. But we certainly have these things that we believe in, and we want to support you. You're doing yourself and your people and your family and your friends, your circle a favor by just protecting yourself right now. And that's okay. You're allowed to do that.
Yeah, that's well said. And in that same context, Of course, over the last couple of weeks, the bar exam, the next generation bar exam, has been all over the news. The NCBE just got annihilated in Above the Law. Joe Patrice wrote an article that got a lot of play around the country talking about how ridiculous the next gen is. Tracey and I did an interview with one of the executives of NCBE. We're going to put that out. But again, it is a distraction if you're taking the bar exam in 2 weeks. Now, if you're taking the bar exam in February of 2025 in California or Nevada, it's pretty relevant. And so we're staying on top of it. But again, for most people that are watching and listening today, it's not your problem. And yes, it's going to have an impact on a group of people down the road, but not today. And so you just got to keep your blinders on, and that's the reality, and trust that we are doing our job to stay informed and keep you prepared for whatever comes along the way. One of the emails, and of course, if you're in the July exam in our course, you get a daily email. I really screwed them up last week. Something about the start of the month just really threw off my email cycling. In any event, I'm back onto the cycle, I think, properly now. And today's email has a video that I really like on selective intuition. It's a message that I did on Facebook last year live, and it really just talks about the nitty-gritty of using selective intuition, particularly for the MBE. If you're struggling with your multi-state score or your Florida multiple choice, and you've heard us talk about selective intuition, but it's still not working for you, I encourage you to watch this video. It's only 20 minutes long, and it is a succinct explanation, I think, of how selective intuition works. But let me just give you the bottom line. If you are getting down, when a student says to me, I've narrowed down, I'm reading an MBE question, I narrow it down to 2 choices. That's not selective intuition. Selective intuition is a faster process than that. It is literally previewing your answer choice and selecting it from the 4 and not trying to eliminate wrong answers. I know Amanda's shaking her head because this is really what it comes down to. People call their eliminating wrong answers selective intuition. That is not the process at all. That is not selective intuition. You should be finishing in about 2.5 hours, and you should be finishing mentally pretty relaxed, not fatigued, not blown up in doing this. If you're not getting the scores you want, if it's taking you too long, if you're still trying to eliminate answer choices, then you're probably not using the technique properly. But, and I don't know if this has been true, Tracey, for you or for you, Amanda, in my one-on-one calls with students, I am getting students now giving me scores that are 70, 80% correct because they're using selective intuition, and actually higher even. So it is possible to get those scores way up when you do it. Tracey, have you seen any of that in talking to people?
Yes, I actually did in my last call. So that was very encouraging to the student and to other students that were on the call. And you can just see the confidence that goes alongside a robust score like that.
Amanda, I know you are a big proponent of selective intuition. It works.
Yeah, and I love teaching the MBE workshop because I love students have that moment. They're like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I thought I was doing it. And I'm pointing out all the ways and that they're trying to figure it out. They're using an elimination. I tell students elimination is not an exam taking strategy. It is a backup when nothing else works
right.
on my 3rd pass of the exam, I'll go to the elimination. But that is not, and there's only certain things I eliminate too. I'm not eliminating where that's not the law, that's not this. And I have a list of the things I do.
Yeah.
And it's so difficult because students they think they're doing it, but they're not. But I would say if you're eliminating, you're not doing it. So that's like just a good key to key you in and revisit, Jackson, your lecture on the MBE, or sign up for the MBE workshop with Jackson or I, just so you can figure out if you are doing selective intuition or not.
Yeah, and Tracey, maybe you could put up that link to the MBE workshop. You could still do it. It's 2 sessions. Amanda is really the person you should do it with. She is really expert at this. And as we get into these last 2 weeks, obviously all 3 of our schedules get fairly crowded, but we've got room. And I think we'd all love to work with anybody that wants to work on this. It's 2 one-on-one 30-minute sessions, and it makes a difference. I really would encourage anybody that is struggling with MBE. This is a great way to get that boost at the end. You can pay for it over time with the buy now, pay later programs, so it shouldn't be a financial hardship for you. In that same context, we have a couple of other workshops that you could take. Another one with Amanda is the multi-state performance test workshop, and that's a couple of sessions on MPTs. I find this is a time when people start becoming aware of the performance test, right? They're like, oh, there's
Yeah.
this thing called performance test, and I haven't done very many of them, right?
Yeah, it is a good
Um,
time to take it if you're still struggling, especially if you're struggling with organization or like
yeah.
moving quickly through the lot. It's a good time to start to and do a few practice.
I would recommend the performance test workshop with Amanda. Go ahead and get that scheduled. We try to keep our schedules relatively open at the end here. Sometimes people think it's too late. It's not. That kind of course correction at the end can be a huge boost. You thought you were doing it right. Now you find out there's a way to do it better. This is the time you want to be able to do that. It's not like you got to be able to practice it for months. It's very directive. And I think all three of us teach these things pretty directive in our approach at the end, because there just isn't time for you to wander around and try and figure it out. So it is a great way to take advantage of the skill set. And then we still are offering the 5 for 5. If you feel like, oh my gosh, I need multi-state help and I need performance tests, I need essay writing, you can do 5 coaching calls and you can pick the coach. Amanda, Tracey, or me, we're all available. And there's enough time to get 5 calls in. We've all done it in the last 2 weeks when it has to be done. And so there's an advantage to doing that. Now, normally that price is $1,000 for those 5 calls. Right now, you can do the 5 calls for $500. Again, it's a great deal. Make sure you check those things out. If you're doing 5 for 5, there's a coupon code, and it's literally the number 5 and then the word FOR and the number 5. And that will make it $500 for you.
I was going to give another tidbit for selective intuition that I had
Yeah.
tried with a student this week for anyone who thinks they're doing it or they're not sure if they are. And this is maybe a bit outside the box, Jackson. This wasn't something we talked about, did by just spending so much time, the MBEs, especially last summer when I was going over the Florida exam and proofing it.
Yeah.
What I had the student do and what I tested myself in doing was I would read the question and answer it without reading the fact pattern. And I can get 55 to 60% correct. Now, some are impossible because 2 answers could be right depending on the fact pattern. However, I found this is a good way to say, what do you think the answer is? Based on the stem of the question, what comes to you first? I wondered if you could test yourself with a few and see if you can get the
Great.
answer. I did that with a student this week and her mind was totally blown.
Totally blown.
And so she just got answer after answer correct. We were actually going through a real exam, like the one that's in the back. And
Yeah.
so I think I'll be trying that with students in the future. I've done it myself just as an exercise, again, trying to get through
Yeah.
Florida. I do think there's something there, right? So much law. And I will preface this with this student knows a whole lot of law, and so do I. The
Yeah.
student is very smart,
Yeah.
but wasn't getting the scores that she wanted. And so you could challenge yourself, right? To do 20 questions, just read the question and say, what do I think the answer is? Select the answer and see if you get it right. Because if you can get 55 to 60 right percent that way, and if you can preview the answer, there must be something about your mind filling in the blanks when you are truly tapped into selective intuition. So I hope you don't mind that I went rogue, but it was, she had her mind blown and I figured out what was happening of why you can do it. Again, some will be impossible, but all of them, but you can do it. You can get more than half correct.
There you go.
Yeah.
Real-time innovation at Celebration Bar Review.
But just to
I
test,
gotta
just
try
and
it.
not, and don't take
I
the
gotta
exam like
try it.
that. And don't
No,
take the
but I gotta
don't
try
take the
it.
exam. Yeah, you try it. You let me know. But don't take the exam like that. That's not my advice. My advice is to select this. I was doing it so that she would focus in on what do you think the answer is, what is coming to you, what is that feeling, right? So if you
Yeah.
think you're doing it, it might not be, you can test yourself just a little bit and then work on it more right now.
I love it. I love it. That's exciting. Okay. Got to get off this webinar so I can try it. A couple of other tools that are available. Thanks, that's great. A couple of other tools that are available are the multi-state nutshells. These are the video nutshells. They are condensed recordings of the key points for all 7 multi-state subjects. You can buy one subject or the whole package, and we will put that link up after the fact as well. And then we have bar maps, which are the mind maps, the timestamp videos, and the fast finish audios. So those are great tools. at the end of your study, and those are all available. And so it's not too late for any of those things. And of course, there's the essay writing workshop with Tracey, and still time for you to work with people on that, right?
Oh, very much. Yeah. And there's also the
Yeah,
abundance webinar that I put the link
sure.
up for that too, if you
Okay,
need
great.
some mindset
Yeah.
help.
Yeah. And I know at the very end here, Tracey, you're going to talk about investing in yourself. So didn't mean to steal your thunder, but we will get there. Let me turn to some student questions we've received this week. A lot of the questions are very specific to where a student is and what they're doing. I'm going to try and extrapolate broader principles where I can. For Amanda and Tracey, as you're hearing these questions, that'd be my advice as well. The first question I got, a student was working on civil procedure, as many people do at the end. And the student said, for some of the questions, I did them within 30 seconds using selective intuition. I got them right. But for longer ones, it was very difficult for me to finish it within 90 seconds. And I feel like I rushed into the wrong answer. So what do I do when I have a long multi-state question, a long fact pattern that's taking me more time? Amanda?
Sure. So I think the longer ones might take you more time in general if you're not a photo reader, but it should even out. However, my approach, I tell people, is if a client was before you, and I give this example, they call me, I do estate planning and probate. And they're like, so and so gave me the will and it wasn't notarized, but it had two signatures. And I'm like, okay, obviously I care about my clients. I'm listening to them. This is a very painful experience. All that aside, they're telling me a lot of stuff that I'm not like, it's not on point, right, with the answer. And they want to know, so is the will valid? Who gets what? That's what they want to know. And that's what the bar examiners are doing, to be honest, with a lot of this. I believe it or not, I don't read this in grave detail. The reason why is
Right.
I can always go back to that. I can always ask the client a clarifying question, and I will just, okay, I see what's going on. It's a will issue. Obviously, the MBE is not tested. I'm just using my area of expertise. Then I read the question and I preview the answer again in my mind before looking at the actual answers. I think it can get you to move a little bit faster if you don't take the bar examiners so seriously, because they're like,
Yeah.
oh, he was wearing a red shirt and it was like black. Okay, stop taking them so seriously, right? Just get through it. If you gamify it a little as if it's a client and you don't know the law, client, so you're telling me a lot of extraneous information, that's not your fault. Obviously,
Right.
I'm not saying you treat your clients like that, but I have to preface that because I own a law firm. So, but the examiners don't take it so seriously. Get through it, because if you need to go back, it's up there. It's the
Yeah.
information's up there. Just stop getting hung up, get through it. And again, believe it or not, you can probably answer a lot of these questions by not reading that fact pattern. I've tested this a few times now where the information you need is in the first two sentences. So you just get to the end, right? I'm not someone who reads the question first, but I'm getting a lay of the land and getting to the end, right?
Yeah.
Then preview, then read the answers. If your answer is there, select it and move on. If it is not, or you're wavering, you can go back to the fact pattern. If you're like, oh, wait, I need to clarify something, just go back to the fact pattern. I think there's a lot of students who get caught up in reading it word for word and trying to understand
Totally.
everything on the first go. That's just my 2 cents or 5 cents.
Tracey, you've spent 30, 40 years talking to clients too. I imagine Amanda's comments resonate with you.
Sure. I'm coming at it from the perspective of a judge at this point, reading lots and lots of motions and briefs and all that. And I don't have time to read 40, 50 pages from a lawyer that could have been stated in 3 pages, especially if they knew FLA. My process is somewhat like Amanda's, maybe a little bit different. I would skim the fact pattern to see what is the substantive area we're talking about. Is this going to be a torts question? Is this a criminal law question? Is this a procedure question? The library am I accessing here? Okay. And then the next thing I always do is figure out the legal relationship of the parties, because if you get that, it automatically brings you to what is the duty, what is the breach, what are we looking at here? And then I do look at the question next, because you can get off on a side tangent that the bar examiners want you to go down this other path if you don't know exactly and hone in exactly about what is being asked. And if you have those three things together, then you are going to be able to access your own library, look at those answers, and use your selective intuition and be ready to move on. I agree with Amanda. If you need to go back and clarify something, you could do that. But really, if you skim it and you know what the basic situation is, who's suing who, or who's being charged with what, and you know what the question is being asked, you're going to lead right to the answer because you already have the information in your head.
Yeah. I agree with what both of you have said. I'm going to take a slightly different approach, which is to talk about the timing. This student said they got through one question in 30 seconds. So the way that I would set up on test day is that we know that you want to spend 15 minutes for every 10 questions on the multi-state, unless you have accommodations. So at 15 minutes, what I would do is right before they hand out the test books, or when they hand out the test books, look at the clock and put in every 15-minute increment from the start time of the test. If you start at 9 a.m., you'd have 9, 9:15, 9:30, 9:45, 10, so on. And at each one of those 15-minute increments, it's 10 questions, then it's 20, then it's 30, then it's 40, and so on. This gives you the benchmark as you're moving through the 100 questions of how you're doing. I'm a little ahead, I'm a little behind, and it creates a pattern. And then I would add a scheduled pit stop, right? Because I'm old. At 50 questions, I'd just say I'm taking 5 minutes to go to the bathroom or put my head down on the table or whatever. And I know I've got that time to do it, but by using the 15-minute increments, you can see if you're on schedule. So if you've got shorter questions, and some of the questions are very short, and it won't take you even 30 seconds probably to get through them. You can do exactly what Amanda and Tracey were saying. You can take more time on this more difficult question, but with one caveat. It counts the same as an easy question. So you don't want to get caught up in it and be at 2.5, 3, 4 minutes, because that's where you get into trouble. If you're watching yourself every 15 minutes, you should have a pretty good pace going through. Over these next 2 weeks, practice that so that you have a body sense of what 15 minutes or 90 seconds feels like. It's kind of like quarterbacks in football. They know how long they can hold the ball if they want to live. And there's an internal clock that says, I got to get the ball out in this period of time. It's the same kind of thing, I think, here. This student went on and asked a couple of other questions that were interesting. They said, we didn't practice a lot of open-ended questions on the MBE. In other words, we were talking about binary choices, plaintiff wins, defendant wins. What happens if there's a question where it's not open-ended? And my answer to that, interesting to see what you guys say, is in that situation, you may need to preview the answer choices just to get the framework. What are the examiners talking about here? If it's not obvious that it's dismissing the case, or it's constitutional, or the evidence should be admitted or not, or the plaintiff should win the tort or defendant wins. If it's not clear to you, then go ahead and just look at the first answer choice just to see what the framing is that the examiners are using. To be candid, there are questions in our course that are older questions that use a very weird form of the question, which fact pattern fits, and is it item 1 and 3 or 2 and 4 or whatever it is. The examiners don't do that anymore. And we keep the questions there because they're good teaching questions. They're good on the law, but the form of the question isn't there. So for the most part, you're going to see a more concise question, typically with binary choices. Tracey, what's your feeling about that open-ended MBE question?
You're on mute, Trace.
I can't.
I don't have anything to add to what you said. I think you stated it.
Yay!
No, I think that, yeah, I really think that's really it. Yeah, if you can't preview it, even sometimes people can't preview a binary just for whatever reason, they can't really do it. And you just read it then and get the lay of the land and what's popping out at you.
That's right. Sometimes the way the examiners ask the question is, what are they? Oh, they're asking, is this statute constitutional? Is that what the question is? And sometimes it just doesn't click into focus. And so you got to look at the first answer choice and go constitutional because, and you're like, okay, now I get the framing. So whatever you got to do to get the framing, just don't get caught up, don't go down the rabbit hole. And then we got a question again about civil procedure. Are there questions, will there be questions on the MBE asking how many days to file a motion or something of that nature? It's not my experience that the examiners ask that. We typically don't see it. There are some of those questions in the course because they're useful things to know if you're going to write an essay in that subject. If you're in Florida, where you've got Florida civil and criminal procedure, it feels like you might have some of those kinds of questions. Spending a lot of time trying to memorize how many days do I get to file something is pretty hard to do. I have to say there's one caveat. In going back and looking at these Georgia essay questions from February, one of the subparts of one of the questions was, how do you file, what are the elements of filing a emotion in professional responsibility. What? How narrow could you be? But my feeling was, and I had to go look it up because I didn't honestly know, but I thought if I didn't know that piece, I could probably use my common sense. And it's one subpart of a 6 call of the question essay. It's not going to make or break me. So I don't think you want to spend a lot of time trying to memorize anything, but certainly not time limits. Amanda, you're the most recent bar taker. Am I accurate in that?
Yeah, and I get this a lot from students about Civ Pro in particular for the
Yeah.
MBE, but obviously Georgia procedure and there's for procedure as well. And I do
Yeah.
tell people like mind map the entire trial from start to finish. Like just
Yeah.
mind map it. And if you have days or how many people need to agree or how many, whatever it is, like just write the numbers colorfully, draw how many people, draw a calendar out, and you will not get it wrong. I hate the fact that I can still see my little jury boxes and my mind map in my head. It's super annoying that whenever someone says civil procedure, I can see it in my head, but just do it and it'll be a good comfort for you. And when you close your eyes, you will be able to see it. If you do it right, and you don't start writing out definitions and rules and you draw a trial from pre-trial motions, what can get dismissed all the way to the end of like how many jury votes we need. And in little stages, you can do this. You can mind map it. You'll get it. You'll get all the questions right.
Yeah. Speaking of mind maps, we got a lot of questions this week from students saying, should I continue to mind map, particularly when I'm doing MBE practice questions? Should I mind map the answer explanations? Tracey, what's your feeling about mind mapping at this stage?
This is the time for you to refine your mind maps and to check your mind maps against the answer key. You don't want to start adding a whole lot of extra things in there, but keywords, key that are associated with statutes or with case names, make sure those are in there. Because especially when you're writing a common law question, you've got to use those key phrases. And many times with statutes, you have to pick up on the keynotes that were in the question or in the essay. And that's the time to put those in. Your mind map becomes how you funnel down now in the next 2 weeks, that and your photo reading, your outlines. So that becomes your daily companion.
Mandy, you're nodding your head. Yes, you agree. Keep
She
mind
got it.
mapping.
The
Okay.
judge, the Honorable Judge Tracey Dawson has.
Okay, I agree. So it's unanimous.
You can make an educated guess. If it's something that has to be an emergency, it's probably 3 days. If it's something that is urgent but not emergent urgent, it's probably 10 days. If it's something that's ordinary course, it's probably 30 days. And if it's something that the judge doesn't care to read ever, it's probably 6 months. So you can make an educated guess even if you don't.
We mentioned photo reading, and I got an interesting question. Somebody said, is it possible to go too fast with photo reading? Is there a preferred speed? No, man, go fast. Your brain can take it. When we do boot camp, I actually try to not scare people by how fast I photo read. I can literally take the entire book and photo read it in about 30 seconds. And that's just because I've been doing it for a long time. And it's scary to people and they think it can't possibly work. It does. There's no limit. There's no high end. But remember that with photo reading, it's a variable event. You've got skittering, you've got super dip and skim, you've got rapid read. There's a number of different tools you can use. And I use the analogy of a speedometer on the car. You can put your foot down and go really fast sometimes. And then sometimes you're in a school zone. You got to slow it down. But what you don't want to do when you're photo reading is read word for word. That's really the thing we're trying to avoid. Can you go too fast with photo reading? Nope, go fast, go as fast as you want. Your non-conscious will pick it up no matter what. We got a lot of questions. I got a lot of questions this week about which tests. We got a lot of MBE questions, as you would imagine. Which tests should I be taking right now? And I want to just give you my sense of what I think the most important practice tests are in the course. Amanda, Tracey, you may have some different ideas. I think in the online practice exams, we call those OP, there are 3 that we have available at Celebration Bar Review. The one that I think is most valuable is the 2014. It's a 100-question exam. And I like it. It's the most recent of the online practice exams, although now 10 years old, weirdly enough. But it's the one that I find most reliable. And I think it's the best of those to do. In terms of the full-length 200-question exams, the 2021 practice exam that the examiners released is not actually a multi-state. It was never given as an MBE, so you can't attach a scaled score to it. but it is all 7 subjects. It's mixed practice, and it's a good test, and it's got the form of the questions. So if you only have time to do a couple of tests, those are the 2 I would do. Now, if you're in our course, you know that I talk about the February 1991 exam, and with every exam, every year that goes by, I cringe more and more because it's such an old test. And the examiners continually harangue me and say, we'd really like you to take it out of your course. And I continue to say, yeah, except that it tends to be and is the most predictive test of all of them. I can't tell you why. It's only got 6 subjects. It doesn't have the percentage of questions in each subject that we have today, but somehow there's something about that test that just resonates. And we still see a very high correlative factor, well over 90% even today. It doesn't mean if you don't do well on it, you won't pass the bar exam. I want to be clear about that. But it is still the test that I think gives us the best predictive value. So if you want to do a predictive test, that's the one that's predictive. But to be predictive, you got to do it in one day, 3 hours in the morning, break 3 hours in the afternoon. Do not the morning session before you do the afternoon session. I'll just tell you, it'll make you crazy, so don't do it. And once you're done with it, the only way to get the answers is you got to listen to a lecture. There's no written explanation. It's that old a test. So there's some caveats there. Do you have to do that test before the bar exam? No, you really don't anymore. So I would say 2014, 2021, and then MBE1. That's my take. Amanda, what about you?
Well, I feel like since I followed your exact formula and I saw
Yeah.
such improvement even from
Yeah.
like this point onward, that
Yeah.
I would agree. I'm not going to rewrite that script. Just in doing them again, don't focus so much on percentages and think stuff is predictive. Some of
Yeah.
these OPs are pretty hard, and just use them, as Tracey
Yeah.
said, to learn and apply and refine.
Still there, Tracey? What's your thought?
I would agree with Amanda. And I think that you get yourself totally psyched out if you're worried about what score you got on them. Instead, work on trying to use your selective intuition, get the answers right, and refine your mind maps based on what you have. And, the scores are going to be what they are later. There's plenty of time to worry about that. But trying to figure it out based on that test, I think, is just a waste of time.
I do too. I want you to learn from the questions. So the order for me would be the OP, then the 2021, and then February 91 if you want something at the end just to see where you're at. There's also students asking me, should I do the second set of 100 questions in each subject? I think at this point, no. If you haven't gotten to those, go ahead and take the mixed subject exams, and if you find you're weak, let's say in evidence, then go do the second set of questions or some of those questions in that subject. They're certainly there for you. I think the people that feel like they've got to do, somebody said to me, I got to do 100 MBE questions a night right now. No, you don't. There's no value to that. I know, Amanda, you're a marathon runner. You don't run a marathon every day for 2 weeks before you run the Boston Marathon, right?
That's exactly right. I always use that analogy.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm glad you're the runner, not me. All right. So, how many questions, and somebody said, how many questions per subject do I need to answer to cover the material? If you've done the course and you've done the first 100, and then you go to the OPEs and the full length practice and so on, you've done enough. There is no magic number of questions to do, regardless of what you've heard from the people that sell MBE courses. There's just no reason to do that. Also got an interesting question. A student said to me,
Can I jump in here just
Yeah.
for 1 second and just,
Yeah,
I just
sure,
want to
sure.
tag on to the back of what you said here. If you're taking the 100 questions and then you take maybe another 100 another day, you're going to know the topics that you are solid in, and you're going to know the ones that you're not solid in. And instead of just continually taking more questions, I think if you really pay attention to how you feel, do I feel comfortable in this subject area? Okay, then maybe you don't need to take any more. If you don't feel comfortable in a subject area, that is the problem with your mind map and how you're accessing your mind map. So that's the time to stop and go back and maybe listen to that lecture, photo read that outline, maybe even write an essay or two in that subject until you get comfortable with it.
I think that's great advice. Honor your inner voice, right? If it's telling you, hey, look, we got a problem with property, spend time in property. Be uncomfortable for a few days in a subject. It'll pay a huge dividend to you on the exam. We got a couple of questions that were logistics questions. Somebody said the 2009 OPE doesn't have an answer key. There's not a one-page answer key. You got to actually look at the answer explanations, but the answers are there. Somebody else said the February 91 doesn't have an answer key. Yeah, it doesn't have an answer key, but it doesn't have written explanations. This is the nature of what comes out from the examiners. We've done this enough times that I'm pretty sure we're not missing anything that you had to have. Then, just to wrap up before we get to Tracey's message today, the student said, what's the 4-column post-writing exercise? This is something I had talked about. 4-column exercise was something that I taught prior to mind mapping and some of the other tools we have. If you haven't been doing it up to this point, this is not the time to start. So don't worry about it. This FOMO that we get into, which is really what this is, I want to do everything, I want to try everything. I need to do this many questions. I got to do the 4-column exercise. I got to do this. Don't do that. What Tracey just said is actually the real wisdom here, which is find the things that you're still not comfortable with. Go spend a day or two in that subject, get desensitized to it, learn it better, and then come back and you will be fine. And don't worry about the other tools if you're not using them. Then the last question that I wanted to address before we got to Tracey, students said, how do I use selective intuition in essay writing? And it's a great question. Before I coined or trademarked the term selective intuition, I created the fact law application writing system with the thought that a student that didn't know the law needed a way to hedge their bets, right? They needed to have kind of a on one hand, on the other hand approach. And it became a function of write about the facts first, then let the facts roll into the arguments, let the arguments roll into the law, make up the law if you have to, and then reach a conclusion. That is selective intuition, because as you write the argument and you say to yourself, what would the law have to be to support this? You are intuiting what the law would have to be, and that's coming from the non-conscious. And selective intuition and FLA and photo reading are all tied together. They're all designed to let you access parts of your mind that you typically wouldn't use. I think when you can do that, you're way better off. Tracey, you remember when we were talking to Marilyn from the NCBE, and she talked about memorizing and spotting issues, which was pretty old school. I cringed when she started talking about that because she thinks the bar exam is a memorization exam. And then she said, we don't really think that's what it should be. You should be able to practice. That's why they're going to next gen. And I was really tempted to say, it's not a memorization test. You just characterize it that way. So there you go. Discreet in my comments. So anyway, that's how I would use selective intuition in essay writing. Amanda, you have any thoughts about that?
No, I think that's exactly right. Students get really uncomfortable about when I say making up the law, but it's just like a phrase I use. You're not really making it up. You are pulling it from somewhere. And it's amazing when students quote or go, I didn't know the law, but then it was right. And I was like, but you did know it then, right? It was just in your unconscious mind.
Where'd it come from?
One of the hardest things in essays that I found with students is when they choose a path that they want to go on for their analysis, for their decision of what should happen. I see students dropping off the law arguments, sometimes on the front end with the party that bears the burden of proof, but that's usually the easier law to pull out and to attach to a theory of the case argument. But the opposing party may not have a whole lot to stand on. It may be pretty clear that they're going to lose that argument. For instance, we had a case with a corporation. The question was, can the president declare a dividend without going to the board of directors? And it was very clear that they can't do that. That student just dropped off the law argument altogether on the response. You would never do that in court. Even if you agree that you're using the same law, there's always going to be an argument on behalf of your client. So it's very important in writing essays that you use the selective intuition, you let it direct you to where you want to go, but you don't forget that there's another party in that courtroom, and that party also has a voice, and that party also has an argument and a theory of the case, the way they look at it. So it's very important to slow down in your essay writing, let it flow, but make sure that you remember that there's two parties in that courtroom.
Cool.
Yeah. And in order to do that, like my trick I use, if anybody struggles with the other side, if you think it's the same law, I write a different law statement. So if it's on negligence, right? party one is going to use the same argument as the same law as party two because it's negligence. I'll say party one will argue this. And then I'm like, negligence is a breach of duty. Party two will argue that they're not liable because there was not proximate causation. In order to prove negligence, you need to prove duty, breach, causation, damages. Oh, so there's a more general statement I put first, if it's the same law, to make it 4 sentences. That is just my strategy for accountability. I'll always have the 2 statements. So I don't know if that helps anybody, like, because I do see students struggle where they're like, it's the same law. I'm like, but not really, because this second party is talking about something specific, like that there's no proximate
Yeah.
cause or there was no damages. So just put the general part first. I don't know. That's just to hold myself
That's
accountable.
great.
I'm also old school, like 4-column exercise thing. So that's why I was like, I must fill in all 4 columns.
That's what happens. And Amanda, I hope you'll be back next week before our last discussion before the
Yeah.
exam. Tracey, we've got a couple minutes here. I hope I haven't shortchanged you too
No.
much, but you were talking about investing in yourself. So go ahead.
Yeah, it's really just an extension of what we've talked about today. You're 13 days out from the opportunity to prove your competence as a lawyer. And this is the time to shift your focus from I'm a student, I'm a client, I'm a devotee of Celebration Bar Review to I am a lawyer and I'm going to prove my competence in this exam. And I'm looking forward to this opportunity to prove my competence. So important that you take that opportunity to heart at this point and refine what you're doing right now. Pick out what you're going to wear to the bar exam and make it professional dress. Make sure that you have an extra power cord for your laptop. Make sure that you have everything charged up. Make sure if you need to bring in pens or pencils, whatever's allowed, that you have enough on hand and that you have them sharpened, or make sure that there's ink in the pen. The same as you would think about if you were going to go to the biggest trial of your life. You wouldn't want to walk into the courtroom and your whole brief is on your laptop, and then you have to say, "Oh, Judge, I'm really sorry. Gee, do you have an extension cord? Because I can't find my opening statement. It's somewhere on my laptop. I know I've got it in this file here, but my battery's low and I can't find it in the files," and that kind of thing. That doesn't give the judge much confidence in you that you know what you're doing. And what you want to do when you go into that bar exam is forget your law school. You're not writing to a law school professor anymore. You're writing to a judge. You're writing to a tribunal that is looking at your competency to go out in the world and practice law. So you want to assume the position and you want to make sure that you are investing in yourself in the next couple of weeks in every way possible. You're eating right. You're not drinking alcohol or using substances to self medicate. You're not on your phone or texting or looking at the news. We've talked about all this today too. You are focusing on what is ahead of you in the next couple of weeks. You're investing in yourself. Think of all the money you've spent getting here to this place, all the time, all the effort, all the brain cells, all the worry, everything. You have invested so much so far. So this is not the time to let down. We're still here for you. We have posted all of these things you can still take advantage of. You can always just send an email to us at admin@Celebration Bar Review and say, hey, do you have this or do you have that? And we will do what we can to help you because we're invested in you, but we need you to invest in yourself now.
That's great wisdom, great truth. Thank you very much, Tracey. This was a great session. I hope that those of you that are on with us live have enjoyed it and learned. I think you will have gotten a lot. If you are someone who is listening on replay, I hope it's valuable for you as well. There's plenty of time to take advantage of the suggestions we've made, the tools that we're offering, and the approaches that we're talking about. And then all 3 of us will be back next Wednesday to wrap up just a few days before the bar exam. We'll give you our final take on things and suggestions for those last few days. This is still a week where a lot of great studying happens. Yeah, go ahead, Trace.
Yeah, Amanda's going to do her coaching call Monday. I'm going to do my coaching call tomorrow at 3 o'clock Mountain Time. Vodka, I believe, is doing one more coaching
Sunday.
call on Sunday. Those are your opportunity for that free group coaching. This is a great time to come and support each other and support yourself with that. So I hope to see you tomorrow.
Thank you for being here, Tracey. Thank you, Amanda, for being with us. Thanks to all of you who are with us today, and have a great study week. And we'll see you in group coaching, and we'll see you again next Wednesday. With that, we're going to say goodbye. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.